welcome to an extraordinary cross-border talk where we react on the recent Russian presidential elections. Vladimir Putin won expectedly with 87% of the vote, and 77% of the people voted in the elections. Many people say everything was very expected to be like that. We are now joined by Veronika Sushova-Salminen, who is going to comment on various aspects of the mechanism of power in Russia, because I guess that is what might be a little bit more interesting now. So first of all, what is the significance of these results, Veronica? What do they show, and how to what extent these elections really matter?
Okay, hello everybody. I think I will start with the second question you were asking. If these results, if the election in Russia, any election, not only presidential election, really matter, considering the way how they are organized, controlled, and managed. So we cannot approach to them from the perspective of normativity of liberal democracy, because even on the Russian side, they don't say we are liberal democracy. They don't agree with it for many years, and they perceive their elections as different way. I would like to first say interesting thing that despite all these things we are going to speak about these differences there are, the newest poll of Russian Field, which is the agency of public opinion, which is seen as relatively independent compared with others, found out shortly before these elections that 66% of respondents in this research think that Russian presidential election, are fair to them. So they don't perceive them as a problematic. 66%. Some 25% saw them as unfair and not democratic, basically. But predominant number of people still see the election in Russia like this. And this is very important because the election or any elections in Russia matter for the regime to legitimize itself, because Russia is still something what is in political science called as electoral authoritarianism, and it still needs a democratical mechanism, even it is kind of virtual democracy more than real, to legitimize the power. Here I would add that when the invasion to Ukraine happened in 2025, at the moment when this situation happened and when basically Russia was at war with the neighbor, there were voices within the system, within the regime, specifically Siloviks, the most conservative type of Siloviks, who were saying that let's abolish elections, any elections, that we will not have elections because elections are for us luxury. We must, be united, consolidated, and this will only make us weaker because of the conflicts which any election mean. So even so, Putin and the core of the regime didn't agree with this solution, and they refused to stop to be elected, despite the fact that it is risking for them always, in a way, and despite the fact that the country is at war. They didn't agree with these most radical Siloviks. So really elections are for them very important because they are giving them so-called democratic legitimacy, and they need this legitimacy to be able to continue to rule the Russia in in a way how they do, so a largely authoritarian way, not too much democracy in it anymore, but still the elections are important. They are important also from other aspect, that always when such a regime goes in election, always there is a high level of risk that something will go wrong. That's why there is a relative interest that the elections are perceived as democratic and fair, because the experience says that specifically the fake elections, election frauds, untrust in election is the trigger for so-called color revolutions, how in Russia call it. So they realized that the legitimacy must be specifically the domestic one. They don't care so much about what outside world think. And they realize, however, that they have to take this risk. And that's why they are trying to manage things most, mm, uh, to really have control of the process. And this is the next specificity, that the electoral process in Russia is very strongly moderated, very strongly managed from the so-called political bloc of Kremlin. There is a control over the competition, control about the electoral process, and also if you speak about parliamentary election, the control goes also about the parliamentary parties or the parties which can basically uh, participate in the so-called competition which there is. So this is the next specificity. You cannot expect the open, fair, playground, because this playground is since the beginning managed. Since the beginning, you can see that they really focus on to keep it under the control, to have stable results. And last thing which I wanted to say about it, I don't know any other country in the world. Maybe there are other, but I know only Russia myself, where the political bloc, it means this managing center of Russian politics, is before election even publicly stating what is the expected result from the incumbent, for Vladimir Putin. And here I would like to say that in December 2023, a political bloc decided that the election result should be following. The turnout participation should be about 70%, from which Vladimir Putin should get 80% of votes. This was what was expected as the result, and you can see now that results are actually a record over the threshold which was given. But Russian elections are really elections where the result for the incumbent is pre-programmed by the Kremlin. So this is the next specificity, and we know about it. It's public knowledge. It was publicly published in a Russian newspaper. This is the aim we are going to. So this is the next specificity which you have there. They really don't make any secret about it. That this is how the electoral process and the electoral management process works.
Okay, you said that basically the result was pre-established or somehow or expected in advance. But what was the significance of the electoral campaign then?
Well, electoral campaign is, of course, in such system focused on how to keep the election legitimate. So it is they are trying to do some kind of campaigning. We have to realize that there were three next contestants. It became clear in the beginning of February that these elections will be based on the most conservative scenario. There were several scenarios which were also publicly discussed, and the most conservative was that there will be incumbent, meaning Vladimir Putin, as a candidate, and against him three other candidates. All of them were coming from the political parties which are currently represented in the Duma, in the parliament. So they were definitely going in this direction that it will be controlled. And as you know, the so-called non-systemic opposition party representative, which was Boris Nadezhdin. Even there are some doubts about his anti-systemic position, because he was also seen as a candidate of one branch of Kremlin administration, by the way, but not this most important. So he was not allowed to candidate. As you know, he was basically put away because there was no interest that such candidate with openly anti-war opinions is there. So this there is the campaign was much about keeping the faith, have this legitimacy continuing. But of course, within the campaign there were some important things. If you look at the campaign of different players, meaning these three contestants of Vladimir Putin, each of them had some particular issues behind. These issues were not connected with the chance to becoming president, of course, but there were other political, let's say, aims and ambitions behind it. Because the importance was also who ends second, who ends third, and how they will perform during the campaign. And in the case of Putin's campaign, you could see that it was also quite conservative and in some parts very inconsistent, I have to say. Because we saw the signals first from the political bloc, from the administration, from these people who were managing his campaign, that after the experience of partial mobilization, which was very unpopular in the Russian society, there were worries that too much speak about war and to put war in the fore could be problem for Vladimir Putin. After all, independent polls were saying that for Russians, war is important only in 12% of cases. Only 12% of respondents were saying that so-called military, special military operation is for them priority. Uh, Much more important were domestic issues, socio-economic situation, economy, and so on and so on. But however, Vladimir Putin was somehow all the time returning the topic of war and returning of conflict with the West in the fore. He was putting these issues even in the situation when the discussion should be about, let's say, municipal policy or about, I don't know, family or other, because he was participating in different pre-electional forums and events which were programmed for him as a candidate. So there was this inconsistency that, okay, do we speak about war all the time, or we will put war as one of the issue, and we will focus on economy, on social issues, on the development, the nation program, so-called, and so on, which was the wish of the political bloc led by Sergei Kirienko, who is the boss of this whole process. So there was some inconsistencies, but on the other hand, we have to admit that for Putin it was probably not so huge issue, because the campaign was he understood probably that so-called consolidation around flag is for him important.
Okay, how would you comment then the results themselves? To what extent they show some message?
Well, of course, the first message is that the results were how were expected, even better than expected. But of course, you see that there are differences among voters. You also can see that there is division in Russia, because okay, you can see there was a high turnout, 77.4%, as we said. So it means that 22.6% of Russians didn't come. They stay silent. We don't know what they think. If they think it doesn't matter, uh, Putin doesn't need any votes because he will win. However, or they don't believe the process, or they don't believe Putin. There can be anything. And then you could see that the opposition candidates this time get only 11% altogether. All these three candidates are 11% support against Putin, who got 87.2, so over this prefabricated, pre-planned number. So if you count these two numbers together, you have like 33.6 people who don't vote, or don't vote for Putin, vote for opposition, from which actually only somehow different message is represented by a New People's Party candidate, Davankov, because all others are basically the same, same version of Putin's policy with some differences, small differences. But still, you have 33.6% who didn't vote for Putin. If you take all number, this 112 million people who have voting right in Russia. So it's, of course, if you put these numbers, it's not so So huge triumph how it's sold, but of course in a way for the domestic public, it is huge support which Putin needs because of the war. I think this is most important. I think there can be, first factor is the war, that he needs highest legitimacy possible. Second factor, maybe psychologically, is that it could be his last elections, because we never know, his age and all other issues and so on. So it could be his last elections, and he wanted maybe to end on the good note. It can be the next issue. So you have there really high percentage of support for Putin, and we are now speaking the support within the system which I described. So don't apply on it liberal democratic normativity, because it's not working here. But still you can see differences. You can see differences in different regions. Classically, the northern regions again were showing the lowest support within this high support. So you have places like is for example, where was the lowest? I am seeing here my, yes, the Arkhangelsk, Karelia. These are classical regions which were always on the relatively opposition side, and there were always issues, specifically in 2012. So again, you see that the numbers are relatively low. Yeah, on the other hand, you can see that there is relatively high support or average support in Moscow, which is also traditionally seen as a metropolis which is more liberal, more liberalized, and so on. And then you have classical so-called electoral sultanates in Russia, where most typical is Chechnya, where, as you know, probably 98.9% of citizens supported Putin, which is, of course, a ridiculous number. You can imagine that this is not, it cannot be the reality. And then finally you can notice that also some of the eastern Ukrainian territories, which where the elections are definitely not according to international law, so they are illegitimate from the position of the international law, you can see that they are also turning to be relatively as the sultanates, because there was high support. High support was in Crimea, 93.6%, and high support was also, if I remember, in Donetsk, uh, uh, no, Donetsk Republic, how it's called, Donetsk Popular Republic or National Republic. So this turned also in the sultanate, in the electoral sultanate, with high support of Putin, which is difficult to believe. But we know why, most probably, that it is the product of not only manipulation with election, but basically uh, the environment in general, and there was a huge pressure to get these results for sure, because we know that these territories are contested. The results there are not legitimate from the international, and legal also from the international law point. But for Putin regime, this was important to get the high support, because he was who annexed these territories and took them back, took them officially to Russia.
Okay, so what's next after these elections for Russian society and for the world, which maybe we will try to deal with Russia?
Well, for the world, that is the easiest answer so far. Putin is staying, and it doesn't seem that there is some kind of huge uprising against him. The society is relatively stable. It doesn't mean that they love him or they really support him. It can be a huge part also of apathy, but this apathy you don't see in these numbers, because it's done so that it's not shown. You cannot know it. So in this, we cannot really say how much these are really authentic the way how they really think about Putin, or how much it is really fabricated, or some kind of like plebiscite automatism, that I go to put it to Putin because there is no alternative. Many people believe so in Russia also. They don't trust others. They are afraid that if Putin will go away, there will be chaos. I would say this is very often forgotten. These elections are important for the way how Russia will be ruled, because elections, as I said in the beginning, they are about legitimacy, and they are kind of a restart of the, for the government, they are a restart for Putin himself, for all system. And now politically, meaning in institutions, because we will see institutional cadre changes soon. But it is also a restart, of course, of the, let's say, governance style. There can be changes in the governance style. So what will now happen is basically we will have 2 months, because Putin will be inaugurated to the next presidency in May. So until May, there will be happening, not very public, but there will be, of course, some leaks, information, negotiation about cadre policy, about who will get which job. If, for example, one big question will be, will Mikhail Mishustin continue as a prime minister or not? It seems he has strong position. He is relatively popular. His government managed the pressure of sanctions, war, and so on. So the question is, will he continue as a prime minister? The next question will be how the government will reshuffle. Mishustin government is believed to be government which is very well constructed together, that each minister, each portfolio is distributed among different factions and clan of Russian politics and oligarchies, such way that there is a good balance. There is no fight, and Putin was always very good on keeping this balance. So this will be next question. The next question will be Putin more innovative in the cadre policy, or he will keep to be more conservative as he is recently? So will there be big changes or smaller changes, and what these changes will mean? You will have to look then who is representing which power group in the system. And finally, of course, there will be other issues, like I wonder, for example, what will be the fate of Dmitry Medvedev, because we know that Dmitry Medvedev was taken down very soon after the constitutional changes in 2020 as a prime minister. He is currently in the situation that he is leading the United Russia. United Russia Party, which is his institutional position, which is giving him a strong institutional position in the system, and he is in the Security Council, and he's trying to save his position by extreme war, like aggressive rhetoric, which is just masking the fact that he's very, very unpopular among Siloviks. They hate Medvedev, and that's why Medvedev is playing this show to save himself against the possible retribution of Siloviks, because he's very unpopular among them. For the fact that he's not from them, he's really the civic technocrat, and so on and so on. So this will be the next question. And final question, which will be connected with the political system. There are some rumors, and that's why I said that the elections were important for these 3 counter candidates of Putin. There are talks about if the political party system shouldn't be reshuffled and changed, and there are some possibly scenario. There are some possible scenario which are saying that, for example, party of Zhirinovsky could be doing fusion with United Russia, because it doesn't make any more sense to keep it independently. And we can see that Leonid Slutsky, who was the candidate for presidency, should be the leading candidate of the party, and his results are very bad. And they were expected to be bad because he's not really a politician. He's technocratic, person who is good in administration, but who is not politician, who has no any charisma, any leadership characteristics. And despite the support of Kremlin, his results are very bad. One of the worst of these 3, basically, if you don't count Putin, if you compare only these 3. So there is the question if the political system will be reshuffled, when political party will be created new one, because many observers say there is a crisis in the political system concerning the political parties. The same you can say, by the way, about Communist Party of Russian Federation. This party is in clear crisis. um, if you compare even the results of the candidates and the support of the party in polls, you can see that there is also a huge difference now. That they were not even able to mobilize own voters. Their own voters voted for Putin. So this is the next sign. So we will see really what will happen. But as I said, this is why the elections are important there. They are not important because of these numbers so much, but they are important because they are restarting all system, and this system can again change, because the Russian political system is, it is constantly in metamorphosis. It is constantly changing in some way, more liberal, less liberal, more authoritarian, and so on. And it is according to these different periods of the time. So this will be, I think, most important result of the elections, and this comes only in May.
Okay, I hope this cross-border talks has been useful for anyone trying to understand Russia at a little bit deeper level than usual. Follow cross-border talks on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and other social media, and we continue to follow the developments in the region.